Welcome to the ICU Video Virtual Roundtable. Today's guest is one of the voices of the Edmonton Oil Kings broadcast, which can be heard on game days on TSN 1260, the dapper and occasionally a rapper, Andrew Peard. Andrew, thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for the introduction. I do want to tell the fine folks my rapping career is long behind me, and I will never be doing that again live on the radio.
Well, I mean, it's sad to hear. Like, let's take the people through that night. It's Teddy Bear Toss night. You've got a young Brennan Clack back at TSN headquarters, and you're prepared to shock the world with a rendition of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Do you remember any of the lines of that? And if so, could you give me a snippet?
Oh, no. Honestly, I can't really remember it, but all I know leading into it was that this goes back to Ken Simpson doing the color commentary with Corey Graham on Oil Kings broadcast, and he always had something special lined up for the Teddy Bear goal call. And then following in his shoes was, of course, Guy Flaming, who I got to work with the year previous. And I kind of figured maybe no one would really notice if we just called it like a regular goal. But Guy Flaming made sure that I was going to have something special lined up. So a couple of weeks leading up to it, I thought about what we could do and something that would be kind of funny. And a big shout out to Brian Cheeseman, the head athletic therapist with the Edmonton Oil Kings. He kind of helped me put it together with a few of the lines, and Ethan McIndoe ended up delivering on that night. And I know there was something in there about being from the mean streets of Camrose, Alberta, because that's where Ethan was from. But that's about it. And it's one of those things that I think for as long as the Oil Kings are around and on the radio and doing the Teddy Bear Toss, it's going to be something that unfortunately the color guy has to come up with in terms of making the goal all that more. I don't know if it's memorable, but more memorable by doing that. But certainly it's something that has to be done, I guess. And if I'm the one that has to continue doing that, I'll see what I can come up with. But it won't be any more rapping and probably no singing as well. We'll have to figure out another way to do it.
Okay, well, we'll put that rap career on the shelf for now. You're entering your third season, I believe, with the Oil Kings. How did you first hear about the opportunity?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. Before I came to Edmonton, I was working in a place that you're familiar with, Wyatt, Whitecourt, Alberta. I was doing the play-by-play for the Whitecourt Wolverines for 4 seasons, being up there, you're always kind of looking to see if you can take the next step. But with that being said, I mean, it's a first-class organization in Whitecourt, and it was tough to leave because you get treated so well there by the ownership group of Brent and Tracy Stark and everybody else that puts that team out on the ice. But it was really weird. It was I was sitting at my computer at my office in Whitecourt, and I got a LinkedIn notification from Rob Vavrick saying that he looked at my profile. He, of course, is the station manager with TSN 1260, and I thought, oh, that's kind of strange. But I thought, well, maybe they're looking for people, so I sent him in my stuff, and a couple days later, he ended up calling me while I was on the golf course at the Whitecourt Wolverines golf tournament, and he kind of laid out what was going on with Corey, and obviously the medical situation that he had, and how he might be unavailable for a certain amount of time, and they needed somebody to come in on an interim basis to do the play-by-play for the Oil Kings. And really they couldn't guarantee much in terms of how long the job would be, but I figured, I mean, what a great opportunity it would be to not only make the step up to the Western Hockey League, but also in a great market like Edmonton and working for a station like TSN 1260. So I knew it might only be guaranteed for 1 week or 1 month, but I jumped on that opportunity and ended up doing the full 2018-2019 season play-by-play. And then, of course, Corey was able to come back on a sort of part-time basis doing the home games this past year, and I was able to slide in and do color for those games, and then continue to do the play-by-play on the road. But it's been a real worthwhile experience, that's for sure. Even more so with Corey coming back, because he's a guy that I listened to for a really long time up in Edmonton. I could catch the Oil King games on 1260. So getting to now sit in the chair next to him and watch him while also listening to him call games has been a real good experience. And, if it's something that has to continue into next year, I'm really looking forward to it. But at the same time, having got to know Corey and become friends with him over this past year, and I know he's working his butt off. The ultimate happy ending would be for him to be back full time and doing home and road games, because he is the true voice of the Edmonton Oil Kings. I mean, he's cataloged it all from the great runs of 2014, 2013, and 2012, which culminated with the Memorial Cup championship in 2014. But right now, it's a bit of a unique situation that we're in, but one I'm really relishing.
And you mentioned while Corey was covering, you do the play-by-play duty still on the road, and then you come back to Edmonton and you do the color. Do you find it hard to transition back and forth, or by now is it just easy?
Well, you know what? It's kind of funny at first, because I'd never done color commentary before. I'd always only done play-by-play. So when they said, "Yeah, you're going to do the color," I was like, "Yeah, I can do that," and not really knowing, just how hard color commentary was. Thinking, if Guy Flaming can do it, there's my traditional shot at Guy, who, by the way, is a fantastic broadcaster and a fantastic color guy. But I thought, how hard could it be? And then I realized the first couple of games, I was still watching the game the same way that you do play-by-play, which is basically just following the puck. And with color, I mean, you need to be able to break down all the other things that go into why a play is made. And oftentimes Corey would finish talking and I would kind of just repeat back what he just said. And I was, starting to realize that's not exactly helping out the broadcast too much. So it took a little bit of time, but it's kind of interesting. You get a new perspective doing color, and I think it does help out when you start to do play-by-play. You start to realize, how these plays are made, what they're trying to accomplish on the power play and on their breakout, and why is the penalty kill so effective, or what's been going wrong with it. So it's a unique perspective, and one that I've really kind of enjoyed going back and forth between, and still trying to figure out exactly how to be the best color guy I can be. But at the same time, Corey's been very patient with me, and I greatly appreciate that.
And you mentioned Guy, he occasionally helps you out on the road, but when he's not there, you're handling both of the duties by yourself. Do you find that has helped you become a better color guy?
Yeah, I think so. That was one thing that I think did help was, for the first year that I was with the Oil Kings, he'd come and do the road games in Red Deer and do the home games doing color. But for the rest of it, I was doing the play-by-play with no color guy. And that's how I had been doing it as well in Whitecourt for 4 seasons. There was no color guy. It was just myself. So I was definitely used to it. I think it does help. It is, I will say this, it is a lot better to call a game with a color guy than to be doing it on your own, simply for the fact that the play-by-play guy gets to take a bit of a break. But as well, I think it's nice to have 2 voices on the broadcast and able to change gears a little bit. But no, it definitely does help, with the color when you have to do the game on your own, when you're trying to come up with different ways to fill airtime as well.
Yeah, shout out to my color guy, Donovan Ekstrom. He is a godsend to just even give me 30 seconds to breathe. It's hard to try and keep up with the game as it goes, but obviously being WHL has brought you a lot of travel. Do you have a favorite city around Western Canada or even the States that you visited?
Oh boy. Well, my first year, it was like, 4 weeks into the season, we take the U.S. road trip. I mean, I'd never called games outside of Alberta. And then all of a sudden we're heading out on this 10, 12 day road trip through the United States Pacific Northwest. And I got to say, 2 of the best cities on that trip were certainly Spokane, which we spent a considerable amount of time in. We kind of had a bit of a break. I think we spent 3 days there. So we really got to go out and see the city. And it's a great college town, of course, with Gonzaga there. So a lot of neat sights there. And then Portland, what a unique city, great, arts, culture there as well. And then they've got, the Moda Center and the old Rose Garden all in the Veterans Memorial Arena, all in the same parking lot. So it's a really unique setup. So those are 2 of my favorites from the U.S. road trip. There's a ton of great cities. Kelowna was a lot of fun this past year. Victoria as well. Out east, love going back to, some people might raise their eyebrows at this, but I did live in Regina for 15 years. So getting to go to Regina, back to my original hometown for a little bit is always a lot of fun. And calling games at the Brand Center, which I used to know as the Agridome, that was a lot of fun as well. And also, getting Winnipeg on the card now this year, that's another great city to go and spend some time in. Although we haven't really, we were kind of just satelliting out there. We'd stay in Brandon, but I think now as teams get accustomed to the setup in Winnipeg, more and more WHL teams will be spending a little bit more time there as well.
So you're from Regina, Andrew?
Yeah, I lived in Regina till I was in high school, and then my family moved out to Calgary, and then I lived there up until 2014 when I ended up moving up to Whitecourt to take on the job with the Wolverines.
You ever find your way down to Craven for a nice little music festival week?
I have been to Craven a time or two, and I will say a lot of people talk about what a great time BVJ is, and it is a great time, but it does not compare to Craven. It's a little bit more grittier out there, and it's a lot of fun. I remember one time I went there, I think it rained the entire time, and it was just a mud pit, but it didn't slow down the partying, and it didn't slow down the music, so a lot of great time spent out there in the valley.
Yeah, people always give me a look because I've been to both, and I say Craven is by far the better situation. I just find it's more open. The people are more friendly. But I remember the first year I went, a guy just strolls into our campsite, takes a seat, and Craven's in that valley, right? And he looks over at me and he just goes, "Look at the size of that mountain." And you're from Saskatchewan.
Probably had a couple of pops in him as well. It wasn't me, was it?
Well, no, he had more hair.
Oh, okay. Hey, I used to have hair.
Moving on. I think a lot of people say that the Oil Kings were a year ahead of schedule that what everybody had expected from the roster. And while it's disappointing they won't get to make a Memorial Cup run this year, I think people should be even more excited for next year's team.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate the way things were cut short this past season, but you look at it, this wasn't going to be a one-off situation with this Oil King team. I mean, really, you're looking at 3, 4, 5 years of a real strong team, and that goes back to the 2018-2019 season, which is sort of that year ahead of schedule where they go from being the worst team back-to-back years in the Western Hockey League to all of a sudden they're the Central Division champions, and they're playing the Prince Albert Raiders, who would eventually go on to win the WHL championship in the Eastern Conference Final. And then you fast forward to this year, and you thought, okay, they're returning a lot of really strong players. At the same time, they're losing Trey Fix-Wolanski, who is a player that you just can't replace. You're losing a Vince Loskiabo, who scored a ton of goals, a ton of big goals. You're losing Quinn Benjafield and Andrew Fighton, two really good veterans. But the team really showed some great growth this past year, where some guys maybe elevated their play a little bit quicker than you may have thought. You think of Jake Neighbors going to become a 70-point player in just his second year in the Western Hockey League. You get Dylan Gunther, who you knew was going to be a special player. He was the first overall pick in the 2018 Bantam draft for a reason. But he had a 16-year-old year that hasn't been seen in a very long time, since basically Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, the sort of dominance that Dylan played with this year. So that helped to continue the growth of this team as well, going out and getting key veterans like Ethan McIndoe from the Spokane Chiefs, Riley Sawchuk from the Tri-City Americans, and then at the trade deadline, bringing in a goaltender in Beck Warm to help supplement another guy who may have been somewhat of a surprise in Sebastian Kosa, who another highly touted prospect coming in, but for a goaltender in his rookie year to play with the sort of dominance that he did, it's not something that's expected from a 17-year-old netminder. But all of a sudden the team had probably the best veteran goaltender in the WHL, the best rookie goaltender in the WHL. They had 4 strong lines up front. They had really 6-7 defensemen that you were comfortable rolling out in any situation. So all that paired together led to the team just sort of picking up where they left off in the 2019 playoffs. And They end up finishing with the best record in the Central Division, the best record in the Eastern Conference, and it was looking like it was going to be a long run and maybe a trip to the WHL final. Obviously, we won't find that out, but looking ahead to next year, Dylan Gunther's only going to be a year better. Jake Neighbour's only another year better. Matthew Robertson, who quietly was, top 12 in WHL defenseman scoring this year, someone who everyone thought is more of a sort of stay-at-home defenseman, can transition the puck out of his own zone well. But he showed that he can quarterback a power play. He can be that number one threat from the back end. So he'll be another year better next year. And then you've gone out and you brought in a guy like Cade Oliver to supplement the hole missing now at the top line center spot with Riley Sawchuk graduating. And you're going to see a better Josh Williams next year, and even better Carter Such next year. Scott Atkinson, the captain. So this team is primed for another really good campaign next season. And, it's sort of sky's the limit for them, I think.
You mentioned a few names that I want to touch on. First, we'll go with Jake Neighbours. Obviously a huge part of the success here in Edmonton. He scored over a point a game last season, and you could hear his name called in the first round of the draft whenever that happens. What is his trajectory in your mind in the NHL?
Yeah, I think he's one of those unique players, and I really hope he's a first-round pick. And, he's a big body player. He plays with an edge, which you want to see out of a guy with that type of size. But he's got skill. He's got a ton of skill, and he's able to use that while not sacrificing from what makes him such a dynamic player, and that's the fact that he plays an in-your-face style, power forward kind of game. But if you need a guy on the power play, he can do that as well. He can be the first man in on the forecheck. He can go wedge pucks loose in the corner. So he's a guy with a unique skill set, and I think that's what, if I'm an NHL team with a pick 20 to 31, he's going to be an NHL player. That maybe he's a third-line winger for your team, or maybe he continues to grow and he ends up being a top six guy for your team. So he can slot in sort of anywhere you need him, and I think that's what makes him an extremely valuable player.
I heard of Blake Como as a comparison once. Do you think that's fair?
Comparisons are always tough. I mean, every player is unique in his own way, but I mean, you look at the career Blake Como has carved out, and it's basically that. I mean, he's had times where he was able to put up some decent points in the NHL, but he's also known to be a real good bottom six guy, a good checking forward with an ability to play in his own zone. So I think anytime if you're a player and you're being compared to somebody who's had a long NHL career, you can't really go wrong there.
Another driving force on that team last year you mentioned was prospect superstar Dylan Gunther. I talked to a single scout, and they'll say next year he's an early first-round talent. What separates him from his peer group?
Oh, man, with Dylan, I mean, it's... When he first came in, he's got an elite shot. He's a scorer. He's a goal scorer. Pucks find him, and he's able to, from the ring at top of the circles on in, if the puck's on his stick, he's going to find a way to put it in the back of the net. But what separated him this year, why he was able to be as dominant as he was at 16, and it took some time. I mean, for the first month and a half of the season, he played on the fourth line. Fortunately, the team didn't have to rush him in as the first overall pick because it was such a unique setup where normally if you're a first overall pick, you're coming into a team that's probably still rebuilding when you're 16. But for Dylan, he was coming into a team that was the reigning Central Division champions and had a ton of depth up front. So They didn't need to force a bunch of minutes on him, and he was able to work on his game, get comfortable, get familiar with the Western Hockey League, the pace of play, and he went to the under-17s. He dominated there, and he didn't miss a beat coming back into the WHL, and his game really took off. And, I mean, his skating got better as the season progressed. You see him out of his equipment, and you might not think he's the strongest player, but he's got a great low center of gravity. He's able to lean on guys and use his strength down low, and all of a sudden his vision was really what I thought separated him this year. The way he was able to find guys, he became more than just the trigger man, sort of say. all of a sudden the puck was on his stick. If he didn't have a lane to the net, he wasn't going to force anything. He could find somebody open on a backdoor play, or give the puck to somebody else for an opportunity to move into a better scoring position and get a return pass. So the way he was able to see the ice is something that I don't think we've seen in the WHL from a kid playing in his first year at 16 years old.
I think something that the last dance with Michael Jordan has taught us is that no spectacular season goes without a bit of controversy. And last year that was between the pipes with Dylan Miskew and Sebastian Cossa. Cossa, obviously, the latter is still with the team, and he had a pretty strong showing in the 33 games he played, picking up 21 wins and 4 shutouts. Is he the future of WHL goaltending?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly here in Edmonton. I mean, he'll be the team's starting goaltender next year. There's a lot of really good young goaltenders going in the Western Hockey League this year. I mean, Dylan Garand, who's going to be drafted this year, the Kamloops Blazers goaltender. I really like Brian Thompson down in Lethbridge as well. He's very similar, I think, to Sebastian Cossa in terms of the way he plays and the size he plays with. But you look at Sebastian, and here he is, 6'5" goaltender at just 17 years old. He's got a great frame on him. And sometimes I think the problem with young goaltenders with that size, sometimes they rely on that size a little bit too much, sort of the blocking style goaltender where, you go down and, well, I'm 6'5", I take up a lot of the net, the puck should hit me. And sometimes there isn't that battle or that compete. But Sebastian has that. I mean, he's a tremendous athlete. He moves laterally in his crease extremely well. He's got great rebound control. He's got a great work ethic as well in practice. As I've been able to watch, probably 90% of the Oil Kings practices. He's always out there working with Curtis Muka, the goaltending coach, and trying to find ways to get better. He's, working on being able to handle the puck more, which has become something that every goaltender now, if you want to find success at this level or at the NHL level, is something that you have to do. So he's got all the tools. Right now, he's playing on a really good team. I think he's going to be a guy with the late birthday, obviously not draft eligible this year. He'll be draft eligible at the 2021 draft. And I mean, you never want to, I mean, you never really hear of goaltenders for the most part being ranked as first rounders, but he's going to be a guy that in terms of goaltender rankings will be probably, you would think, in the top 5 worldwide come next season.
Head coach Brad Lauer recently took home WHL Coach of the Year honors. He's just 2 seasons into it with the club. What difference has he made to the team in that short stint?
Well, I think what it was when he came in with Luke Pierce as well, the new assistant coach, a whole new coaching regime, and they were coming into a team that returned a lot of players from teams that had finished below or at the bottom of the standings. And it was a culture change that he brought. Not that there was anything wrong with the past culture under Steve Hamilton. Obviously, he had a ton of success with this team as an assistant coach during those great runs in 2012, 2013, and 2014. But, sometimes you just need a refresh. And Brad brought that. I mean, he was a long-time NHL assistant coach with the Ottawa Senators, the Anaheim Ducks, and the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think what it was he came in and he treated these young players like professionals, like young men. And they rewarded him for that with the way that they competed every night on the ice. And for Brad, I mean, he, I think, had a lot to prove coming to the WHL. Longtime assistant coach. He wanted to prove that he can be the guy. He can be a head coach. And what does he do in his first 2 years as a head coach? Well, he wins back-to-back Central Division championships. He wins an Eastern Conference championship, albeit in the regular season. And then he's the coach of the year just 2 years in. And, he's responsible for 2 of the top 5 years in Edmonton Oil Kings franchise history in terms of regular season success. So he's come in sort of known as, I think when he was an NHL assistant coach, as a power play specialist, and Oil Kings specialty teams were very good 2 years under him. But just overall, I think just the culture he's brought is what has led to success with this team. What
other teams do you think will pose a threat to Edmonton next season?
Oh, boy. Well, the Messinat Tigers with Willie Desjardins back, they were nipping at the heels of the Oil Kings this year. They'll probably be strong. I mean, they do lose James Hamlin, and they'll probably lose Matt Sogard. Those are two big pieces that they'll have to replace, but they got a good young player in Cole Sillinger. Speaking of dominant 16-year-old seasons, they've got a good goaltender in Garen Bjorklund as well, playing in his first year in the WHL this year. So they look like they've got the pieces to supplement what they've lost. So I think they'll be a team certainly in the running. Well, Lethbridge Hurricanes, who we found out this year, you don't count them out. Peter Anholt and Brent Kissio, the work they've done there. Of course, Peter Anholt was the executive of the year this year in the WHL. I mean, no one was talking about the Lethbridge Hurricanes heading into this year as being a team to compete amongst the top of the Eastern Conference. That's exactly where they were because of some of the moves that Peter Anholt went out and made. So I wouldn't count them out. Obviously, it'll be interesting. I mean, they'll probably lose Kalen Addison. He'll turn pro as a 20-year-old next year. Dylan Cousins, we'll see if he ends up making the Buffalo Sabres after the year he had in the WHL. I don't know what else he has to prove in this league, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But they've shown that they've been able to go out and find ways to plug holes. So I'm sure there'll be another team that's very competitive next year. The Prince Albert Raiders, they're a team that, just in 2019, they win the WHL championship, and they did it a lot differently than some other teams. You think of the Swift Current Broncos, who went out and had to mortgage a lot of their future to win a WHL championship, which is fine, and I don't blame them for doing that. You can't replace a WHL championship, and the cost it takes is whatever it has to be, and certainly it helped out that organization. But you look at the way the Raiders did it. They did it through the draft. They didn't go out and have to trade a bunch of picks and prospects to bring in players. So they're a team that's not only set up for the present, but they're set up for the future as well. The Saskatoon Blades look like they're starting to find some consistency, being a top-end team, but I think next year in the East Division specifically, the Brandon Wheat Kings are probably going to be the team that finds themselves around the top there. You look at all the potential players they're able to return there. The great defenseman in Braden Schneider, who will probably be the first defenseman from the Western Hockey League drafted this year at the NHL draft. Ridley Gregg, who will be a forward kind of drafted in and around the same area as Jake Neighbors. Luca Burzan might be back for a 20-year-old year. That's a high-end player. So, and of course, Dave Lowry's their coach, who knows nothing but how to win as a head coach in the WHL. So I think, there's a group of teams right there that'll be highly competitive. And of course, the Calgary Hitmen, they're a team that they're going to lose a lot this year. Their captain, Mark Kaslik, Yegor Zamul on the back end. I would imagine Jet Wu probably turns pro next year. But they still have a pretty good core there as well. So there'll be a ton of teams trying to track down the Edmonton Oil Kings, certainly, and it's going to be a very competitive Eastern Conference next season.
Now, Andrew, you're not just strictly a hockey guy. You've also done some work with the Edmonton Prospects. How did you enjoy that experience?
Oh man, that was a ton of fun, and I got to give credit to our friend Tyler Remchuk. At the end of the Oil Kings season, he asked me what I was going to do this summer, and I said, "Oh, I don't really have any plans at this point. I'm going to have to do something to find some time to fill my time in the off season." And he mentioned that he was working with Rob Zitlau and ICU Video doing the Edmonton Prospect games, and wanted to see if there was any games that he couldn't make that I'd step in and fill in as host. And it ended up being a lot of games I ended up doing, and it was interesting. I've always been a baseball fan. I'd never done any sort of broadcasting though in baseball, but you get in and around the guys behind the scenes like Rob and Dave, and they make working there really easy. And then the team itself, with Jordan Blundell as the manager, I mean they were so accommodating. It blew my mind that in the middle of the game I would go interview the manager. And it wasn't a problem. I couldn't imagine doing that during a hockey game with any of the coaches. But it was a ton of fun. It was a unique experience, and what better way to spend your summer than basically kicking it outside at the Ball Diamond. We did see a lot of rain last year, but there were some nice days as well, and getting to watch the ball games and hanging around the guys. It was a ton of fun. I'm hoping that somehow the WCBL can be the season can be salvaged this year, although time constraints are going to be what they are. But I would be more than happy to be able to do that again, because it was so much fun, and just a different perspective as well. Different way of broadcasting things, and it being video. I've only ever done radio broadcasts, so that was interesting as well.
Have you ever dipped your toes into any other sports other than hockey? And is there something that you'd like to try your hand at that you haven't yet?
Well, baseball was the one. I always thought I could do play-by-play for baseball, and then last year I figured, listening to all the games of the prospects, now I probably can't do that. That is way more difficult than I imagined. But doing the game hosting was so much fun. So that was always one that I wanted to do, and was happy to do. But I mean, I've always heard a lot of people that I've talked with that calling a football game is something that's a complete unique experience compared to calling a hockey game. And I know Dustin Nielsen does such a great job calling the Golden Bears games, and now doing the CFL on TSN, which is always fun to hear his call there. So that'd be another one that I would like to try. But hockey has always been number one. I grew up playing hockey, and it's the sport that it doesn't matter what day of the week, what month of the year it is. If there's a hockey game on TV, I'm gonna sit in, and if I can be at the rink to watch it, great. If not, I'll definitely be tuned in on either TV or radio.
So you spent 4 years in the AJ. You're going into your third year in the Dub. Are you done at the Dub, or would you like to move even further to the AHL, NHL, or even across seas?
Oh man, you never want to limit yourself to anything, but I'm not going to lie to you. When I went to broadcasting school, my goal was to get to the Western Hockey League, because like I mentioned, I spent the first half of my life living in Regina, and we don't have an NHL team there, and my dad took me to all the Regina Pat games. So the league I fell in love with and fell in love with the game of was the WHL, and listening to Rod Peterson call the road games for the Pats. That's what made me want to become a broadcaster. So it was always my goal to get to the WHL. I'd like to sit here and say, yeah, I'd love to go to the NHL. We all would, but there's 31 jobs. So if anyone wants to hire me, sure, I would more than love to. But I'm very happy in the Western Hockey League. For me, it's the most exciting league I think going right now. When you look at the talent coming up, and you're getting to see these players at 16 to 20 and really watch them grow, getting to see them practice on a daily basis and play on a daily basis, and then it's fun to watch what they do afterwards. And even doing that at the AJHL level, calling these guys playing their 16 to 20-year-old years there, and then seeing what they go and do off at the NCAA is always something fun to track. But the WHL has always been the league I wanted to broadcast in, and right now getting to do it with TSN 1260 and the Edmonton Oil Kings has certainly been a dream come true.
Thank you for joining me, Andrew. I had a lot of fun today, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
My pleasure. Anytime. My schedule is wide open, as you can imagine right now.
I feel you.